Hi guys, how's it going? First of all, thank you to everybody who takes the time to watch this video. And yes, I do have a little bit of this written down to get my notes in order, so we'll see how we do. Alright, usually I don't take videos like this to use against somebody else, or to criticize somebody else's work, or to call somebody out. But I'm here to challenge somebody's thoughts. There is a YouTube video called The Total Money Makeover Criticism with the description, and I quote, "I have dinner and kick Dave Ramsey in the proverbial balls." Well, my response to this is that this guy does not criticize Dave Ramsey's The Total Money Makeover at all in this video. This video has nothing to do with Dave's teachings or the book. No references or specifics are addressed in this argument whatsoever, nor is there a better solution suggested to replace Dave's financial get-out-of-debt formula. This video is about Dave's personal attack on Peter Schiff, who, if you're not familiar with who Peter Schiff is, he is an American investment broker. He's an author of several books, such as The Little Book of Bull Moves in a Bear Market, Crash Proof, and the revised Crash Proof 2.0. He's a financial commentator. He's a CEO of Euro Pacific Capital Inc. in Westport, Connecticut, and CEO of Euro Pacific Precious Metals, LLC in New York City. And finally, he was a 2010 Republican primary candidate for Senate. Now, in January 2008, a young lady called in the Dave Ramsey radio show asking Dave where he stood on Schiff's book, Crash Proof, and his forecasting of an upcoming economic collapse. Well, then Dave realizes that this is Irwin Schiff's kid, Irwin Schiff is the one who led the U.S. tax protester movement and is in jail right now for tax evasion. So mostly Dave personally attacks Irwin Schiff with words such as kook or nutburger. And this is all very true. So do Peter Schiff's motives become questionable about his own father's imprisonment? Probably a lot. And yes, I would say that Dave probably owes Peter Schiff an apology in some respects. But the fact is, my friend, this is America. And Dave can stand by his remarks until death if he wishes to, because we, the people, are free to do so. But this video is about choosing sides. And his description of the video does not depict anything remotely close to what you are expecting to see. This is a one-sided, closed-minded, naive approach to one of Dave Ramsey's biggest radio downfalls, if you will. Now, let's get to actual quotes. You said, "Total Money Makeover, woo, and here's my favorite. Thanks a lot, Dave Ramsey. I wonder how many people got screwed out of half their life savings because of your shitty advice. How about that?" Unquote. Well, I have read Dave Ramsey's The Total Money Makeover and Financial Peace, and I've read Crash Proof 2.0, the revised version of Crash Proof by Peter Schiff. Have you, sir? It sure doesn't seem like it, because you do not dig into any specifics on either regard or either book. And you admit on your video that you have asked other people about Dave Ramsey. Where's your research? Or where's your better solution for that matter? Now, you mentioned later in your video about how Dave Ramsey listeners lost their investment in the stock market. Well, I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to clarify that Dave Ramsey actually teaches about investing in good growth stock mutual funds, specifically in the S&P 500 index, with a 10-year or more good track record, because of the calculations behind the risk involved. That means you, the investor, have to do your own homework before buying into these funds. That means that the blue-chip Dow Jones Industrial Average and the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite have a lot more risk. Take a minute to compare the volatility of the index funds in the small-cap-based S&P 500 to the volatility of the large-cap Dow Jones and see for yourself which is a more or less risky investment. When you do your own research, if you're sophisticated, you have to mathematically adjust for the risk you're taking. So following the Dow Jones Industrial Average from 2000 to 2010, the final closing average for the decade was around 10,000, despite the 2008 economic plunge and the impact of 9/11. And Charles Schwab mentions that Americans need to learn how to mitigate risk and are in dire need of financial literacy and assistance. Now, besides the fall through of corrupt government-treated banks in 2008 to present day, and Americans crying foul during the subprime fallouts and housing meltdown, something else I want you to consider. Federal authorities arrested Bernie Madoff on December 11, 2008. In March 12, 2009, Bernie Madoff pleaded guilty and the biggest Ponzi scheme in history rose to the surface. What's my point? My point is, if you think Dave Ramsey's teachings screwed his listeners, I seriously encourage you, since you like to watch YouTube so much, to check out some videos posted by the Madoff victims and do some comparison. Watch the video of the woman holding her baby in her arms in tears as she tells the viewers of how her and her husband are trying to figure out how they're going to piece their lives back together because they invested with Madoff and this lie. Watch how many lives in the whole financial system has been changed forever because of this. And in case you didn't know, Bernie Madoff was one of the co-founders of NASDAQ. Something to think about. Which brings up two lessons that we must take from this tragedy. Numbers don't lie, and if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So I also do recommend that you read Harry Markopoulos's No One Would Listen. And Harry Markopoulos was the whistleblower out of Boston who tried to turn in Madoff. Another book I recommend that you check out would be When Genius Failed by Roger Lowenstein, written in 2000. This was referring to long-term capital marketing in the 90s. And the lesson here is even a group of brilliant MIT and Harvard economists, businessmen, and professors in the macro and microeconomics cannot time the market and how it's going to behave. America doesn't seem to want to learn its lesson, sir. And you made no reference to this whatsoever. Now, you also said, Dave Ramsey, you are not an economist like Peter Schiff. But does Dave Ramsey know economics? Let's look into it. An email from Ted says, eat crow. He said the Fed is doing everything in its power to rescue the economy, and how Ben Bernanke of the Federal Reserve merged to assess Bear Stearns, bailed him out, and is indeed a recession despite what you and the CPI numbers say. Is this ignorance? Indeed, because as Dave explains, the CPI is not how you measure a recession. The CPI is the Consumer Price Index, which is the measure of inflation, the rate of inflation that way. Now, the GDP numbers is a big indicator in the event of a recession because this statistical measurement of goods and services in our nation consists of three types: nominal, real, and the GDP deflator. And which one's going to follow closely? Now, granted, the GDP deflator does follow very closely to the track record of the CPI, but which one do we use? Well, the nominal GDP resembles foreign exchange of goods and services, and the real GDP measures the domestic statistics, America's success and prosperity. So, if the real GDP shows 6 consecutive months or 2 quarters of negative growth and the unemployment begins to reach a phenomenal high percentage, this indicates a recession. So Dave outlines some basic principles of economics in this discussion. Now, getting to the topic of gold, Peter Schiff has a chapter in his book about investing in gold, and gold does a number of things as an investor. It makes you a balance for your portfolio, and it's a liquid asset, and when you formulate an asset allocation plan, your choices in gold consist of several options such as gold coins, gold bars, which is bullion. You consist of gold certificates and gold ETFs. If you're not familiar with what an ETF is an exchange-traded fund, which is sold pretty much minute by minute once per day. They're good for beginning investors because this one means you have instant diversification. So think of an ETF as a fund that is on the clock, basically. Now let's find out what Dave Ramsey is, why he's against investing in the gold commodity. One, its track record since the gold standard averages long-term almost identical to the rate of inflation. 2, it's not a medium of exchange. And 3, gold has so much emotion and volatility and speculation attached to it. Not to mention the media bias that tells us that the sky is falling plays a role in gold as well. When the dollar becomes weak, this surge of out-of-control fear and greed and speculation is centered on not just the primetime networks, but in gold advertising as well. It is force-fed to us through a media-generated feeding frenzy. Traditionally, U.S. Today Money states that gold has been viewed as a classic shelter investment, often used as a hedge against inflation, and since its inception, stocks on average have reached 12% as opposed to gold's average of 4%, and gold does not pay any dividends or capital gains. From a theological standpoint, fear, greed, and speculation, none of these are fruits of the Spirit. America needs to calm down and learn how to have courage when investing in and staying in any market. So this pessimism and this succumbing to victim thinking is because the media influence is unbelievable. So I'm going to try to wrap this up, and I got maybe 30 seconds left on this, so I'm going to make another video to attach to this one. So thank you guys for listening, and please tune in to part 2 of this criticism.